Gary, I I want to start with Ukraine because I'm interested in sort of the political disposition of this government and this administration toward the Russia-Ukraine situation, which has changed first diplomatically because you saw Trump even in public remarks say, "Hey, uh, Putin's surprising me. I don't know what he's got, kind of what's gotten into him." And then you see Ukraine bloodying Russia with this drone strike over the weekend. I'm wondering if you can work sort of that situation and the political calculus of it.
Yeah. Well, I think you've hit on some key points here, Mark, and that is, Trump. I mean, his loyalties run thin. So anybody that thinks he's, in Putin's pocket or vice versa, Trump's in his own pocket. In other words, I think he really thought that he could, through the force of, personal persuasion, et cetera, kind of bring Putin around. But I think he's come to the realization that many have had for a long time that that's not likely to happen. And I think what happened over the last week to 10 days with these strikes deep into Ukraine, particularly Kyiv, and the innocent slaughtering of civilians as part of those has really set Trump on edge. And I do believe his patience is wearing thin. And then there's another part, of course, that Trump admires, and that is strategic success. And so the second part of this, when you saw, if it's true, and by all accounts right now, it appears to be that this drone strike by the Ukrainians really is a Trojan horse thing, Mark. If you dig down there, it's pretty remarkable. These little wooden houses that apparently kind of roofs came off, and all of a sudden these Ukrainian drones started taking out Russian bombers. I mean, they apparently may have taken out as much as a third of the long-range bomber force that the Russians are using against Ukraine. Trump likes that kind of success, right? So I think in some ways, to say the situation is fluid would understate it dramatically. But I do think that as supposedly Ukraine and Russia coming to the bargaining table again, I think Trump's patience is wearing thin, especially with Putin, and he wants to see something done. We'll see what happens, but you got to hand it to the Ukrainians. It's a David Goliath situation over there. And from a strategic point of view, there were a lot of people giving him kudos this weekend.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you make a good point. Trump likes a winner. He likes to back a winner, and all of a sudden, Ukraine seems to be at least have won the day. And so, yeah, that may it's kind of there. It is. That's the parallel that you drew. I've heard that. In fact, we had a military analyst who were playing a little bit earlier, and he described it the same way. It's just it's so effective and brilliant. I mean, it's not only technological genius, but you have to have put together the rest of that strategy, as you say, something that that won't arouse attention. And those wooden houses didn't arouse attention. Just incredible.
There's one other thing, Mark, I would say about this, and that is the broader implications for this so-called success in asymmetrical warfare. That this is something that, as we think about building more aircraft carriers and everything else, there's a lot of military strategists saying, you know what? With the advent of modern technology, you can have a lot more impact than your budget or your forces show. If you do it smart, if you do it, organizationally well. And the Ukrainians apparently have pulled off something that is going to be studied in the places like West Point for years to come.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I kind of was talking about that as well. The fact that both the U.S. and Russia are kind of wedded to this post-World War II giant expensive hardware. That may not be the way of the future when it comes to the military. Take me back to this country and where we sit politically. I see I was talking before about these immigration busts where they scoop up people who are actually headed to a legitimate immigration hearing about their asylum status, and masked Justice Department, Homeland Security people pick them, ICE agents, right? Pick them up, and the legal situation that they're involved in that courtroom is scuttled, and they're now taken away under arrest, and now they're in a different legal situation. It's a real perversion of the system as I see it, and I'm of two minds, and I wanted to get your thought on this. One is it's wrong. because these are not the violent criminals. These are actually immigrants who are applying for asylum, and they're going through the actual legal prescribed process that is indicated that they must follow, and still we're scooping them up and arresting them. But also, and this is the political part, I don't know that this lands with people. I think people don't care about this immigration thing maybe the way they should. I mean, especially when it comes to due process.
Yeah, Mark, I think the challenge for the average American and all this immigration stuff is kind of exactly what you're alluding to. There's just so much constant barrage about this issue, trying to keep track of the different scenarios, the different cases, the different raids, the different courts. It is a daunting task, right? And I think for most Americans, this is the take, right? They said through the ballot box and through all the polling that we have of last year and this first part of this year, yeah, we want immigration solved. Do they want to get down to the nitty-gritty details? No. Do they want the legal immigration process to be preserved and to work? All the polls say yes. In other words, I think it's important to make a distinction on behalf of Americans that from everything that we know, Mark, electorally and from polling, people aren't against immigrants. They want the legal process to work, right? What they have been frustrated about was the so-called porous borders, the open borders, right? And that's been the concern. So the challenge for Americans is in their workaday lives, and kids, at school and now it's summer, it's trying to follow, is the Trump administration doing this legitimately or not? And that's where I think a lot of the confusion now lies.
I was reading a piece over the weekend that suggested that Trump's people and GOP constituents around America basically don't want criticism of Trump, regardless of how crazy he may be, posting conspiracy theories, whatever the crazy, reflexive, impulsive post of the day is. They also don't appreciate GOP turning on Trump, questioning him about the big, beautiful bill, all of these things. There seemed to be, in this piece I was reading, a solidarity with Trump supporters that was really almost cult-like, And I'm wondering if everything that you review, because you just have access to so much more, and you also speak with so many people, you have such access that way. If things that you're seeing also sort of reflects this this strong cult-like support that Trump has, and dare anyone to step out of line.
Well, I think, Mark, the way I can best ascertain the current American electorate and the current American populace is sort of in three pots, okay? I think you do have the always Trumpers, the Trump true believers, who fall into the category you're talking about. He can do no wrong. We're not going to question it because even if it's in a Machiavellian sense, the greater purposes are such that we're not going to question it, right? We're not going to weaken our guy or the GOP in any way. So you have that third. Then you have the third on the other side, of course, the never Trumpers, mainly Democrats, but certainly a chunk of independents and even some Republicans who say, this guy's gone off the rails. I'm not going to support anything he's about in any way because I don't trust him in the slightest regard, right? And then you've got this middle third of people who really want some of the basics of the Trump agenda to succeed, like immigration, right? Like an economy that's working and humming along, like a United States that's a bit more muscular on the global stage and doesn't feel like it has to take a back seat. And that third of people are the proverbial swing voters, and there's even some in the Democratic Party. There's more in the Independent Party and certain some in the GOP who are skeptical of Trump himself and some of his policies, but want those broader, big agenda items to succeed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And you're right. I mean, some of that is transactional, like the last thing you mentioned. Like I've got stuff that we got to get done here. I can't get distracted with the fact that the guy's a loon. So, yeah. In fact, Tony, I wonder if I could play for Gary a little bit of what Russ Vought said. Russell Vought is, of course, the OMB head, but he's also the primary author of Project 2025. And you'll remember that leading up to the election, Trump knew nothing about Project 2025. Project 25 had some stink on it. I'm guessing, in retrospect, Gary, that probably a lot of people didn't even know what Project 2025 was or care. But we, those of us who watch it on a granular level, we were all concerned about Project 2025. Anyway, the, of course, agenda of Project 2025, we've seen very much in play, right? The dismantling of government, the key being privatization, ultimately, of a lot of these government agencies or government services. So he was asked on CNN about Project 2025 and how it fits into the Trump administration. Go ahead, Tony.
One of the things that you have become known for is that you were one of the architects of Project 2025. And one of the things that was noteworthy during the campaign was that President Trump really distanced himself. He said he doesn't know anything about it. It's not something that he had any knowledge of. But obviously you did, and you're now there. And I just want to show our viewers just some of what was on your checklist. A lot of them have been checked off from Project 2025. There are others that are kind of in the pipeline, including ending funding for PBS, NPR, and many other things. Is it fair to say that what you are doing now is, in part, enacting this very document that you and your colleagues worked very hard on, Project 2025?
No, of course not. The only people that are delusional about whether the president is the architect, the visionary, the originator of his own agenda that he was very public about throughout the campaign, in which you are seeing him in rapid fashion go through and accomplish, are his adversaries. And I think it's one of the reasons why you had to have the last segment with the leader of the Democrats, who are in such disarray, because instead of talking about the real issues of the forgotten men and women, they're coming up with these fake news stories.
I'm not suggesting that he's not in charge. I'm just saying that now it's pretty clear that what he wants to do and what you planned are dovetailing.
I think the president was very clear with his agenda, and he is going forward with that agenda, and he has been at the helm and the originator of all of these ideas.
Okay, last question. Other recommendations from Project 2025: eliminating the Fed, privatizing Fannie and Freddie, banning medication abortion. Are those still on the agenda?
What's on the agenda is what the president has put on the agenda, most of which he ran on. And you will continue to see the things that he's interested in doing, and those people like me will be executing that vision.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, of course, that's rhetorical smokescreen. The agenda is dictated by vote and Project 2025. It's my opinion. And Trump is, working in some announcements and pronouncements in between golf games as he plays president. So that's my sense of it. But you can certainly see in the way in which his agenda, Project 2025's agenda, has been executed thus far. I mean, the DEI, the immigration thing. I mean, you could see the checklist. Just it's being carried out almost to the item.
Well, the thing about it is, Mark, it's difficult to ascertain it, and separating the wheat from the chaff in this. In other words, how much of this was already in Trump's mind prior to 2025? That's what we don't know for sure, right? One thing we do know, and I think it goes back to your original question about where Americans are at politically on. One thing we do know is that this so-called flooding the zone, that's the new term, right? For just a million, we heard it there. I mean, Dana Bash was kicking down a bunch of things, right? The eliminating funding for public broadcasting. I mean, you could throw in there trans athletes in girls' sports, right? A big issue, as you know, in California and nationally over this last weekend. There are so many things, right? And some of those are polled pretty well, for the president. I mean, you had 70 to 80% Americans saying, yeah, we're not big on the boy and girls sports thing, right? That was even last year. So I think the challenge becomes, that's why, for example, your question of, are Americans able to sort out all the stuff about this detention and that ICE hearing and everything? Because there's so much, Mark. I mean, I can say it again. We have never seen an administration move so many planks in an agenda forward so quickly. Never. I mean, not in anybody's recollection. And this is part of the challenge, It's like, Americans, do you agree with this? Well, yeah, I kind of agree with that. Well, then when you start trying to get down to the nitty-gritty details of how Trump is doing it or how other people may be negatively affected, that's where it starts getting lost.
Do you think that Americans are okay with the increasing religiosity that is informing so much legislation around the country? The Texas Ten Commandments thing is probably the most recent. But you see the way in which religion and those who have a strong adherence to a real, almost alt-right kind of extreme view of religion, and Mike Johnson might be the highest profile example on Capitol Hill, how there may be an agenda related to that. It was mentioned slightly in all of that. You could sort of suggest that the mifepristone, like getting that off the market, making the medical abortion pill no longer available, how that might fall into that category. I'm not suggesting that on abortion that necessarily puts you in the category of an extreme right-wing Christian flank. But I wonder if you could speak to the way in which religiosity is informing so much of what's happening in America right now. It feels as though a lot of that crew is now in power, Leonard Leo and the like.
Yeah, well, I would say that certainly they have a lot more power than they did in the Biden administration, no question about it. I mean, but part of that is the nature of politics. I mean, when you look at when people are asked, Mark, like going into elections, this is pretty routine. How much is your faith going to influence your vote on a variety of things, right? To be honest with you, the people that put that as their top agenda item, usually it's somewhere around 15%. So much of the things that we talk about, do they have religious origins? Well, I don't know. Do they have religious affinity? Well, they could. For example, boys and girls sports. That's something that's, is broadly adopted by Americans right now as something they're not generally supportive of. How many of those people in that specific instance, is that a religious motivation or just a more quote unquote, this is the way I was brought up, or I don't want my daughter to have to deal with this? I mean, even Gavin Newsom, supports that position. Is his a faith-based position? I don't think so, based on everything we know. He hasn't expressed it in that vein. So you see where I'm going with this? Sometimes it can be difficult to discern on a particular issue, is this something that's generated out of somebody's faith experience or not? The other thing I would say, Mark, more broadly about faith is some of this, take it out of the Christian realm, look at the challenges going on with Israel and Palestine, there's a lot of faith components to that, as that many people, might be a driving force for them. For other people, it's like, really, it's not about Jews and Muslims to me at all. It's about innocent people being killed. So there's another example where sometimes these things have religious undertones or inclinations. For many people, they don't.
That's a fair point. Tell me what's happening at the FBI with Kash Patel. I'm reading more and more that there are issues at the FBI. Patel putting more and more of FBI employees and agents to polygraph exams, to test loyalty, to find leaks. Patel himself, of course, I consider him a Trump henchman. I consider him a thug. He is running that agency in that way, where he's purged the agency of any agent or any official that he feels doesn't show enough loyalty. The litmus test is that J6 question, did Donald Trump legitimately win? Did he have the 2020 election? Did he have it stolen from him? That became a litmus test. It's a loyalty test at the FBI. And then Dan Bongino, of course, is his number two. Give me your take on what's happening at the FBI in the future there.
Yeah, well, Mark, that's a good question, because I think if you look across the panoply, across the smorgasbord of federal agencies, that's probably the one out of any of them where we're seeing these so-called questions. Remember, the term used to be pretty commonly used, the deep state question, right? In other words, are there people embedded in this entity, this agency, that just are inherently anti-Trump, and they have to, in the current Trump administration, be exorcised, right? Be taken out of their positions because of that. You see that in different ways. It's brought up sometimes at Health and Human Services with RFK and others, but where you're really seeing it is in the Department of Justice and the FBI. So, there's going to be a lot of scrutiny of this. No doubt there already is. You're pointing it out, I don't think the average American wants anybody, especially something like the DOJ and the FBI, to be loyal to a personality or a personage. That's not the average American's idea of how this thing's supposed to work. Likewise, for Trump people, they, have a big chip on their shoulder because they think it was just the opposite, right? That at the start of the first Trump administration and through the Biden administration, that they were coming after Trump. I mean, it was, the deck was stacked against them. And so in their view, this is just sort of righting the ship. But there's going to be a lot of scrutiny of this, and there's no question about that. The proof is going to be in the pudding, Mark. I mean, if some things are overlooked that ought to be investigated when it comes to Trump actions or Trump official actions, that's when we're going to know, hey, you know what? The pendulum's gone too far the other way.
My last question, I'm keeping a little over time, but my last question to you is news that came out around Tulsi Gabbard, and she's the director of national intelligence, and the intelligence briefings that the president usually gets. Apparently, Donald Trump doesn't take them. He gets an average of one briefing a week, and he pays little attention to it. He doesn't read anything, is what is being said. This is word that's coming out from people within DNI, or within the intelligence community, I should say, and from DNI, the director, Gabbard. She's saying she's looking for different ways in which to present the information to make it more palatable and engaging. He watches Fox News. That's really all he does, apparently. He watches television. And so she's now looking at ways of reconstituting the briefing. Instead of a briefing book, instead of a briefing sheet, they've tried condensing it, making it a one sheet, etc., using his name a lot. None of that works. So what they're trying now is to give him a video offering that looks like Fox News Channel with an anchor and all that sort of thing. Can you speak to that? To me, it's somewhat alarming.
Well, look, has anybody ever seen Donald Trump walking down a walkway outside the White House with a briefing book in his hands? I never have. Never. And that's not.
He doesn't need to, Gary. He knows it.
What?
It's all right here.
Well, no, and I think to your point, Mark, I think this is really interesting. And does it signal a change in our culture, or is this just Donald Trump writ large, right? And my point is simply, look, the larger American populace is reading less and less, and dramatically so, right? I mean, this is part of the challenge with the demise of the print media, right? I mean, seriously, I say this more broadly and culturally speaking, that have we reached the first president for whom the briefing book does not work, right? He is not going to sit down, at 1 o'clock in the morning at the end of his day and flip open that binder, or get up at 5:30 over his first cup of coffee and start flipping pages. I just don't know whether this indicates a complete shift in the way information is going to be consumed inside the White House, like it isn't, at a Starbucks. I mean, where you used to see people opening up a LA Times or New York Times or a San Francisco Chronicle, you don't see that anymore. You just don't. And so that's going to be the question.
It's just that I expect the average American may not be reading as much, but I expect the president to maybe read the briefing material. Sorry, he's not just some guy at Starbucks.
Right. Well, one thing we know is that Trump likes to talk. He likes to give and take, the back and forth about verbal briefings. He likes that exchange, right? He is not a cerebral kind of a guy that's going to sit down and pore over documents to make his decision. He likes, part of what I think is remarkable, Mark, are these constant press gaggles and open meetings inside the Oval Office, right? Where he'll bring in a head of state, have a bunch of cabinet secretaries sitting around, and then press behind him. And we're watching policy making kind of unfold in real time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is sort of part of the whole new way that policy is debated and discussed and made over TV. This is Trump, and is it just him? And in 3.5 years that vaporizes and goes away? Or is this part of the new reality that new media is helping shape the way even the Oval Office processes and digests information?
Let me weigh in on that. I think it is absolutely Trump. I mean, you so correctly identify the fact that he wants to be on. Why have a meeting with this guy if it's not televised? Give me the cameras, give me the press. Now I'll meet with this head of state. Absolutely Trump. He's a performer. It's all theater. Then he wants to go play golf. So the idea somehow that, it's going to continue on because it's new media, no. I would say, it's my opinion, again, that this is Trumpian. And, he, in a way, he's a host. He hosted The Apprentice, and now he's hosting the presidency. So I love our time. I've exploited you. I'm over time. And you're so gracious always to let me do it. You can find Gary on iHeart Radio. You can find him across the CBS television stations. And here on Mondays, Gary, thank you so much, pal.
Thank you, Mark. Have a great show.
Okay, thank you, pal. Gary is brought to us, of course, by Bill Campbell at Remax Gold. Love Bill Campbell. If you're relocating in or to Northern California, you need a highly respected real estate professional. Bill Campbell is that guy. Remax Gold. You can text him or call him 530-448-7474, 530-448-7474. Bill Campbell at Remax Gold. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.